But first of all, we are living in exciting times because we are witnessing the largest ever rollout of an HTA process that is going to affect the market access of medicines and high-risk medical devices in 27 member states. That's really exciting to witness that. Welcome, all of you, to Erasmus University Rotterdam. For those of you who are here for the first time, we are at the campus called Woudestein, which hosts all the faculties that are the non-medical faculties. And we have a second location, which is on the other side of the town, where the medical faculty is, and the Erasmus Medical Center. At Erasmus University, we call the faculties schools. And we are from the Erasmus School of Health Policy and Management. And with we, I mean the HTA department. And I have the pleasure to be the head of that department. The HTA department employs about 50 researchers who are active in the field of health technology assessment. And from the beginning, we have always been very actively promoting health technology assessments from a societal perspective. And our department, together with our affiliated institute, IMTA, Institute for Medical Technology Assessment, which was already founded in 1988, we have also developed methods, tools, questionnaires to enable the application of that societal perspective in economic evaluations. Think, for example, of the friction cost method to estimate cost of productivity losses, or methods to calculate cost of informal care, or the IMTA burden of disease calculator, which determines which cost per QALY threshold is applicable to an economic evaluation. And that latter instrument is also very relevant in the discussion of the definition of unmet need in the HTA regulation. And you can find all these tools on the IMTA website, where we share them for free for academic research. So this is the picture of our second campus, the medical faculty and Erasmus Medical Center, with in the front the Sophia Children's Hospital. And Erasmus Medical Center is the largest medical center in the Netherlands in terms of turnover. It has around 1,230 beds. And last week, my colleague Frederick and I were talking to one of the people working in the medical department, distributing the drugs. And she told us, well, when I'm honest, I'm really standing with my back against the wall. Because the problem is that the money that we spend, that we as hospital pharmacists spend on expensive inpatient hospital drugs, is increasing every year. The national average in the Netherlands is a 7% annual increase, whereas our hospital budget is not allowed to grow. Just a little bit. The national average is 3.6. So basically, expensive inpatient hospital drugs are taking an increasingly larger share of the total budget that we have available for inpatient hospital care. In the Netherlands, that share increased from 9.4% in 2017 to 11.6% in 2021. And it's very obvious that this increase in costs of expensive hospital drugs, which are basically ATMPs, oncology drugs, drugs for rare diseases, the orphan drugs, it's clear that these drugs displace other forms of hospital care. That's what the hospital pharmacist said to us when she was teaching in our course, Pharmaceutical Pricing and Market Access. And this course is now running at the same time as we have this conference here. It's a 6-week course, and we allowed our students to be present in today's meeting as well. So welcome to the students as well. So in the Netherlands, we have a procedure in trying to contain the cost of expensive drugs, and that's the so-called lock procedure. So if expensive drugs are expected to have a budget impact that exceeds 20 million a year. Previously, it was 40 million, but the threshold has lowered. Then they are put in the lock procedure, so not included in the basic benefit package before price negotiations have taken place and an agreement on the price has been reached. And Equalis has recently investigated the health effects of this lock procedure and came to the conclusion that the net results of this are positive. Of course, there is a loss in QALYs during the lock procedure because the drugs are not available, but because they become available on the market at a lower price, you gain QALYs. And overall, there is a net result of this procedure. This is just one example of a country trying to deal with the cost of expensive drugs. And in all of the countries, all the member states in Europe, we have different procedures regarding pricing and reimbursement. And these different procedures affect the availability of, in this case, oncology drugs in the various countries. These are well-known figures from the IQVIA weight indicator showing difference in availability of oncology drugs between countries. And when you look here towards the left-hand side, some Eastern and Central European countries where the availability of drugs approved between 2018 and 2021 is much less than in the Western European countries. Of course, this is not entirely the result of different procedures, but mostly also due to strategic decisions of the manufacturer to postpone launch because of our reference pricing system and because of being afraid for parallel import as well. But these differences are existing. And our EU HTA regulation aims to contribute to reducing those differences between countries in availability of drugs. It also, of course, aims to harmonize our methods and procedures of HTA, make more efficient use of the resources we have for these assessments, and to improve business predictability. The first Implementation Act has been published in March, and it provides some clarification with respect to timelines and procedures and methods, basically on the JCA, the Joint Clinical Assessment, but it also made clear that timelines are still very challenging. From the Implementation Act, we have learned that the starting point of the JCA is now at the same day as the manufacturer submits the dossier to EMA. And then the scoping process needs to be ready. So scoping and PICO definitions need to be completed at maximum 20 days after the list of questions by EMA, so around day 140. The manufacturer has then 90 days to submit the dossier. But this coincides with the first clock stop of EMA. So that's quite challenging for the manufacturer to address the questions from EMA and at the same time submit the dossier. Well, the dossier has to be available at least 45 days before the CHMP opinion. And that means that the developer cannot take into account the results from the second clock stop. The HTA report will then be available around 110 days later, so around this time. And during this HTA assessment report drafting, the technology developer has only 7 days to flag factual inaccuracies in the revised draft of the final report. The final JCA report needs to be endorsed within 30 days after the European Commission decision, which is quite a challenge in case the EMA process is fast and when a second clock stop might not be necessary. Then it's very difficult to meet these timelines. So quite a lot of challenges that we will discuss over the next 2 days. After the first Implementation Act has been released, It provided some clarity, but still there's a lot of discussion points on the table. I summarized them here in this slide briefly. A lot of discussion is still going on the PICO definition and consolidation. Which country asks for which PICOs is unknown, and also we don't know whether the request of every country weighs equally. There's a lot of discussion around collaboration with EMA, a lot of discussion on the consequences that the EU HTA regulation has for the national processes, what adaptations are required. Is it perhaps possible that the laws in certain countries need to be adapted as well? A lot of this discussion also on stakeholder involvement and conflicts of interest, timing of the involvement, transparency, confidential information, what can be shared, what cannot be shared, etc. A lot of discussion also around the methodology, especially on how to deal with single-arm, non-randomized evidence, trials that have used surrogate endpoints, because it's clear that especially for some ATMPs, we will have an increase in drugs that will be approved based on single-arm trials. So we need to rely more on real-world evidence to create, or in secondary resources, to create control groups, synthetic control groups. And we need some agreement on the methodology that is acceptable and less acceptable. Same applies to indirect comparisons and network meta-analysis. We will have only limited head-to-head information, so we will have to rely on indirect comparisons, and we need to develop a common understanding of what is acceptable and not acceptable, because the regulation requests evidence synthesis and meta-analysis for every particular PICO. And that will inevitably lead to inconsistencies between the networks and between the results. So lots of challenges. And I think the success of the HTA regulation depends on all of us as stakeholders finding the right balance. Balance between the benefits and the risk, between the type 1 errors, the true positives, and the type 2 errors, the false negatives. And that applies to all stakeholders. For example, patients have to balance the risk of taking a treatment that in the end may only provide hope and no effect, versus the risk of accepting the reality of their prognosis, but missing out perhaps on a treatment that would have been beneficial. And of course, it's very important in the joint HTA process that patients' voices are heard in every step of the life cycle. But we also have to remember that the JCA somehow acts on behalf of the general EU public, and that are the taxpayers who bear the consequences in terms of cost of the decisions. They also represent the future patients who are mostly unidentifiable yet, but whose treatment may be replaced if we allow a lot of expensive drugs on the market on which we have limited evidence. For the health technology developer, the balance is between investing with the risk of investing with insufficient return on investments and the risk of missing out on a profitable opportunity. And when you look at the first implementation act, the role of the technology developer is quite limited. They will only be invited to an assessment scope explanation meeting that has to take place then within 30 days after the assessment scope is already finalized. And I said already earlier, they have only 7 days to flag technical or factual inaccuracies. So their role is really quite limited in this process. But why wouldn't you make more use of the knowledge of the developer that has the best understanding of the technology? It does not necessarily jeopardize the independence of the process if you have the right safeguards in place. physicians also are dealing with this balance between this, in their case, over-treatment and under-treatment. And we know that there is substantial overutilization, especially in oncology, of drugs that have limited effects, especially towards the end of life. But at the same time, we know that there are problems in the sense that many patients in the world do not get the cancer treatments that do have a lot of benefit. For regulators and HTA bodies and payers, the balance is between approving a drug while it turns out that the benefit risk is not so positive, versus the risk of denying the drug that in the end turns out to have a positive benefit risk assessment. And the same for the payers with respect to reimbursement. And we know, of course, from looking at past experience, that there are a substantial number of accelerated approvals of oncology drugs that have been withdrawn from the market. There was this 2019 publication in the BMJ that showed that of 44 indications for which there was, at the time of approval, no evidence of an overall survival gain, only 7% showed evidence for extending life later on, post-marketing, and only 5 reported quality of life benefits. And here, another example of 26 indications, a very recent publication this year, 26 indications listed as withdrawn by the FDA. 8 are still authorized and on the market in Europe. So we have to be careful in finding that right balance. But I'm a positive person, and I think in the end, the benefits of having a joint clinical assessment report as a common starting point for the HTA process in the various countries will outweigh the potential risk associated and the points of discussion that we are still having on the HTA, so that the coordinating group can find the right balance between having this accurate, transparent process in place while not delaying the national decisions. Well, time will tell, of course, and we'll see how things play out, but having this common starting point is really very important, I think. Thank you very much. And we are now continuing with our first speaker. Oh no, first with the results of the questionnaire, the survey.
Thanks, Maureen.